to go. So I hope you've had a wonderful week, getting ready to switch over from fall to, well, from spring to, or from summer to fall. So hopefully you guys are doing well. So today we're going to be talking about process improvement, and process improvement seems to be one of those topics that fits into project management from a lot of different angles. And a lot of times process improvement maybe was not the original reason why you were doing a particular project, but you found yourself having to adjust processes because the project streamlined the processes or made some of the things much longer than what they needed to be. So let me get our slides up for us, and that way you can see what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to be talking about process improvement. So you should be seeing this come up on your screen here. Yeah, I believe that's it. All right, so today we're going to be talking about process improvement. Now, as you look at processes that are being impacted by a project or by software or whatever the case you're trying to do, processes is nothing more than the steps of action to get to a particular outcome. That's all it is. And so when we're talking about process improvement, you're looking at those steps, trying to make sure that they are running efficiently for the customer. That means that those outputs are coming out with a reasonable amount of time, and that there's not a lot of waiting time there that's just needless delays. Sometimes people, when they're looking at project management, what they want is they want the software or something like that to follow the exact same steps, and sometimes that's not needed. Many times when you're automating some type of process, that reduces the time, and because you don't have manpower on it, and it removes some of the needless steps that are there. So a couple of quotes that I thought were really good. Edward Deming who's had a powerful impact on quality and process improvement, and Joseph Juran. And so these are two quotes that I wanted to give you to kind of lay some foundation for this. Deming said about 95% of the changes made in management today make no improvement. And so what he was pointing out is that we make a lot of change, spend a lot of money, do a lot of different things, but the truth is, once the smoke clears, we might be doing it differently, but we're not necessarily doing it better. And I know some of us have all lived through those things. Joseph Juran, who was also a heavy-duty writer on leadership and quality during that same time, he said, the crisis in quality won't let go. Competition in quality will continue, and so will the impact of poor quality on society. And so when we start looking at project management, we have to consider process improvement as at least an option that we might need to include in that project. To do the project and still have the same clunky processes, the same waiting times, might not make any sense. Now, maybe your projects are different, but might not make any sense whatsoever in those areas. So where do problems have a tendency to surface? Well, 85% of the problems come from bad processes. And of course, you've read that in many different places over the years. And so about 15% of the problems come from people. But many times our assumption is that the people is where the problem is, and not the process. And so if you work for an organization that has had processes in place for years, it's very likely that there's some of those processes that one of two things is happening. And this isn't a criticism, it's more of an observation. But one of two things is probably happening. Either those processes need to be updated drastically right now, or when you look at it, many people probably are not really following the process. They're following their process where they've streamlined it and cut some of the things out. And even though you have a documented process over here, they're doing their own thing, which is one of the things you're not wanting to have happen. Managers blame people for problems, and people blame management. But the truth is, going back to the processes will alleviate a lot of these different pieces. So when everyone blames someone else, it creates cycle, and no one is really solving the problem because everybody's pointing their finger at each other. So what you're really trying to do is assume you've got good people, assume you've got good managers who are not trying to purposely sabotage or hurt people or blame people that's needlessly, and that the problem is probably behind the scenes in the processes. So does the process work? That's one of the first pieces of information that we have to consider. Process improvement normally works in every company. And the reason is because what you're doing is you're taking the workers, the teams, and you're working with them to decide what steps need to happen to bring that output, to get that product out or to get that output out for it to move into the next cycle. And so with the team doing this, they know what the process is. They know what steps they're taking right now. Now your process process, if it's an old process, could have other steps in it. And so when it does not work, there's a clear reason. For an example, maybe management misused it. Management didn't participate in it. And this is all from Harrington. Management feels the employee is the problem. Management's unwilling to make a long-term commitment to change things. Management doesn't make it part of the business activity. Now, I think sometimes managers and many of the techs that are out and have been out for 20 years, management gets the blame. But the reason for that behind the scenes is because management is leadership. And so management should be the visionaries. They're the ones who have the authority. However, what you're really needing is for management and the team to work together on this, because management, if they do it by themselves, they're doing it in a vacuum. Team doing it by themselves don't have authority. And so you're really needing them to come together and work on both of those. Now, one of the things that you get into with this is you have to understand what your real process is. So many organizations had to have documented their processes. A few years ago, we were jumping through the hoops for IACET, which is a certification group, so that we could give CEUs for different courses and things of this nature. And one of the things that was really good for us is that we had to document our processes, our marketing process, our intake, our inbound customers, how we take care of them, how do we get them signed up and into our online programs or our virtual programs. So we had to map all those out. And it was really good because you could really see what those steps of action are. Your particular company maybe has done something like that too. If you're ISO 9000 certified, then your company has already done some of this because they're certifying processes in many cases and asking you to be lean, and also asking you to be able to streamline those processes to where it brings about the most value. So process mapping is what we're talking about with this piece. So I've got to know what my processes look like right now in order to be able to help my processes. So the focus is on identifying each step in the process and the actor responsible for each step. So we're going through, the best scenario would be management and teams going through and taking each step and mapping it out. Whether it's visual or in a line item, it doesn't matter. The point is you've got to map those steps out. And one of the things that you'll probably notice is that we are doing some of these a little differently. One department might be following the same process, but they're taking a different step or they're doing it differently. But the point is you want to map this out so you know what you're doing right now, the way it looks right now. The second side of this is then process modeling. It creates a visual of the process and connects the process to the organizational relationships, the economics, and the business rules. So once you map this one process out, you're now able to start looking at, okay, how does this influence everything else with the business? Most processes are not just standalone processes, as you already know. You know that many of these processes are feeding into another process, which feeds into another process, or maybe in many cases, multiple processes. And so if we can build efficiency in any of these, then that's going to build efficiency in the total process time by reducing that process time. So, but what you're doing with process modeling is you're creating the visual, but you're looking at how does it impact other parts of the organization. Now, let me give you an example of where to look. When you're talking about process modeling and process mapping, you're looking to see where is the waiting time that doesn't bring value to the company, the customer, the worker, okay? Let me say it again. You're looking for waiting time in the process where it stalls. And nobody can tell you that on the outside. You have to look at it with your team and map that out. So what happens is that you start looking for stall time where the process stops, and maybe some people will call it where it batches. And so in other words, do they have to wait 48 hours for so many things to happen before it can move to another step? And so you're looking for waiting time all the way down through here. Anytime you can remove some of that waiting time, you're speeding up that process, which is going to ultimately speed up the delivery. And so obviously that's what you're looking for, because waiting time does not build value for the customer or the employees who's having to use this process. So where do problems surface? So start with the processes, Processes are normally one of the main places because we've got waiting time for whatever reason. Now, here's the thing. The waiting time did not get put in there because you had bad people or bad management. It made sense at the time. The process came to this point, it had to wait 24 hours for so much to happen, and then it would pick up again and go on. But that 24 hours could be cut now, but at the time it was right on target. So look at your process. The second place to look at control mechanisms. Control mechanisms can allow a lot of different things to happen. Just like in project management, our control mechanism is change control, for an example, which doesn't allow scope creep. Well, control mechanisms are controlling when are these processes violated? Who has the authority to say that we're not going to use the process in the way that it is already designed? If everybody has authority to do that, your process probably isn't helping much because people are deviating from that process several times. And then as a last result, look at your people, because that's usually where we start. Is if I had better people or better trained people, or my people were more attentive, we would not have all of these problems with the processes. And it might not be a people problem at all. It might be a process or a control mechanism issue with your situation. So 9 times out of 10, look in these 2 areas first before you look in the people, on the people side. Now, the goals of all of our processes is to run daily actions in the most efficient and effective manner possible, to reduce the number of steps when moving from one action to another, and to deliver a product or service at a faster rate of speed. And so that's why we're talking about lean. Lean is removing any waste in the process, or removing any waste in the sequence. And you and your people will know where that waste is. And so what you want to be able to do is to be able to get it out the door to them. Now, when we talk about speed of the product is that output. So whatever that output is, even if that output is going into an input of another process to finish the sequence, that's okay. But that was a product or an output from this process before it went in as an input into the very next process. So let's go back and make sure everybody's on target here before we move any further. So what is a process? Processes move a product, service, or outcome from one point to the other. It converts inputs into outputs, that output of a product like we were talking about. And everything we do, if you think about it, has some type of process. If you decide you're going to go to college, you have an enrollment process. You have those type of things. And so what happens is those are the steps you have to do to enroll in college. And so we follow steps of action or processes for a lot of different things. And one of the crazy things is that our whole life is pretty much connected to processes, either those of our company or processes of those from the vendors or from the stores that we even buy things. And one of the things that frustrates us is when you see a goofy process that makes absolutely no sense. And you'll see that sometimes when, even as a customer, for a personal stuff that you want to purchase, you will get caught in some kind of goofy process that makes absolutely no sense. And of course, it's worse because we're project managers and we spot that so quickly. But the point is, it happens even in those situations. So here's the elements of a process that you're wanting to break apart. What's the inputs, things going in? What's the outputs, what's coming out at the end of this process? Steps of our activities, that's all the steps that we have to go through going from the input to the output. What are the controls? So how are we making sure that people do not deviate from this in some way? And then verification, is the process working? So it's rather simplistic, but it doesn't mean that it's not complicated when you're trying to look at the influence this process has. All the steps and then the influence it has on other processes can be huge. So sometimes even though it's relatively easy, it's not easy on the side of looking at its influence. And of course, the type of organization that you're looking at in which process can make a huge difference. Now, there's some common types of processes. So let's lay the foundation for some of these. The first one is called a business process. It runs the daily and common processes for any company, its major activities. The focus is on the customer, the product, or the service fulfillment. So if we're running business processes, when that customer picks up a phone or sends an email and wants to engage us for their business, for their product, or for our product or service, then that puts them into that business cycle. And so once they make that contact, then we're making a contact back. And so we're now starting the steps of action to turn this person from somebody who's a seeker out here just looking at vendors or looking for a product or service into somebody who is now purchasing that product or service and getting them into the pipeline there. So we all have those business processes to be able to do this. The second one would be a management process. This connects to the internal operations of the organization. The focus here is on internal workers to support the strategic goals, strategic vision, the portfolio, the programs, and all of those things. Now, when we go to management processes, this is normally going to be driving those strategic plans and strategic goals that we've talked about in other sessions, because what's happening is management's being measured on, do they achieve the strategic goal? And of course, those strategic goals will filter down into the projects that we're running. And so that's going to fulfill a piece of that strategic goal. But under management processes, they also seek to drive compliance and efficiency from resources. Management's overseeing the resources. They want those resources to be used as efficient as possible. And that's one of the reasons why process improvement needs to be connected in most organizations, at least looked at, and to verify that these processes are still good. This is still the steps of action we take, and look and see if can we not tweak these others just a little bit and make this thing run better than what it's running. The frustration that we see is when we've got dead time, waiting time, and nobody wants to address those particular pieces. The third type of process that you have to look at is supporting processes. They connect to the operations, the value chain, and the internal customers. The focus is on internal workings within the organization. So like for an example, an example of a support process would be that once a new customer gets into the pipeline over here from the salespeople, let's just kind of go from that. So once they get into that sales pipeline, they get to a certain point, and now that information gets distributed to 3 different places within the company. So the salespeople still have it, but now we've got our marketing people who understand that now they go to a different tier of marketing because they're a customer now rather than a seeker. And then also we see up here with management that this person is now, or this company is now, one of our customers. And so now we're going to be tracking them for how much value that customer is buying from us. And so from that particular aspect as well. Now, some examples of this could be people we hire, could be maintenance and facility management, could be accounting. But the point is, we all have those different tiers to where that customer name goes into different places at a particular point in that pipeline. And so, once again, like with hiring, for an example, I hire you. And so you send a resume in, we do our interviews and our 14,000 interviews. Okay. And so we finally decide you're the person. Okay. So now what happens, you're in that pipeline. And so now once you get hired, your name gets distributed in multiple places. Why? Because you work for us. And so now you're in different processes that are going through it as an employee, which is going to take you down a whole series of processes that might be a little different. And obviously one of those is going to be HR, because they've been connected. Management's going to know who you are. And obviously we got to get you into the pipeline with finance, because we like, I'm sure you want to get paid something if you're going to work for us. So it kind of gets you into those multiple processes as well. Now let's go into something that will help you a little bit, I think. Let's talk about triggers for process improvement. Many people will just assume that the processes are running correctly, because if they weren't, then management probably would be doing something. Okay, that's not always true. Management's swamped, you're running with a skeleton crew in most cases at most organizations. You're probably in the same boat. And especially as we're dealing with inflation and all the different things economically, everybody's wanting to hire people for certain places, but once again, we're not wanting to hire too many people and have to lay everybody off. And rightly so, nothing wrong with that. But there's some triggers that let you know that the process improvement, it could be an issue there. The main trigger for process improvement should always include effectiveness and efficiency. Some triggers which might not be as common could include regulatory compliance, and many of you probably have that because you have to comply with regulatory for certain things. And so what happens is those processes have to adjust. And it doesn't matter what you think about it, they have to adjust because regulatory said they have to adjust. Creation and compliance of best practices. Many organizations are following an industry best practice for their projects and for their processes. Removing customer complaints, and sometimes that's what you'll see. Customers are complaining of certain things that are happening. And so what's going on is you realize, okay, we've got a little process problem here. So the customer complaint, Containing cost overruns or excessiveness on cost. And so obviously that would make sense. Strengthening the product or service offering. We're trying to provide a better product because remember you have competitors in some of your organizations. And then also supporting technology improvements. And this is one of the things that many of you maybe get into if you're in IT. If you run IT projects, is that IT has made that process obsolete. And so that process is not needed the way it is. And to leave it there makes no sense whatsoever. And then, of course, just the overall idea of reducing waste. And time is waste. So we want to be able to reduce that waste so that people have the capability of being able to do that faster or to do it through automation, and they're not having to interact with a person. So what is waste? Because that's really what you're trying to get rid of. Waste can include any resource which is used in ineffective ways or any leftover materials which are unusable for other work. So if we were on a construction site and you see sheetrock being thrown away, we look at that as waste that you're throwing away. And so obviously you want to minimize the amount of sheetrock you throw away or the amount of pipe you throw away and so forth. So it makes sense to us a lot of times from a construction standpoint. But the thing is, when we bring it over to time and we bring it over to effort, for an example, do you want to do rework over and over and over again? Of course not. None of us do. And so what we want to be able to get something done and not have to do rework on this. And so that's waste for that type of project. Now, some important qualities. Waste can and should be identified in the process, and that's one of the things that we have to look at. Waste increases cost and expands the time, and waste can reduce worker productivity. And you want to see frustration, you see a worker having to redo something over and over again. One of the things like on our side, like we write training programs and do training programs, and I want to be working on the newest training program, our newest version of that training program. If we're writing it, I don't want to be working on something that's already gone through 3 or 4 edits and I've got an old one, and I'm thinking, well, man, this thing's missing all kinds of stuff. I want the newest version of this, or there's a waste of time. Now, removing waste drives process improvement. So the more waste we can remove, whatever that waste is, and that's where the key is, whatever that waste is, the more we can remove, the better we are making and the more efficient we're making that process. So process improvement seeks to make the process stronger, faster, and more effective. One form of effectiveness is removing that waste. And so if we can speed it up, if we can keep from throwing certain things away. So movement is moving packing items closer together to speed up the outputs, reducing the handoffs for speed. All of those can help with this. Unnecessary inventory is also looked at as waste. That's the reason why many who are in manufacturing who use this, they make sure that they have just-in-time delivery. And just-in-time delivery means that the products get there just in time for the manufacturer to need it. Now, we're struggling with that right now because guess what's happening? The products aren't getting there just in time. Apparently, everything we want is on a boat someplace. Everything your kids want for Christmas is out on a boat someplace on one of the coasts. So just in time works great as long as it gets there just in time, but it's not working so well right now. Unnecessary inventory. Large stockpiles of inventory cost money and is a waste because of storage. And of course, your car industry really was the one who kind of started seeing a lot of this. And that's what motivated the just-in-time inventory control system, was to where the products would arrive tomorrow that we're going to be using the next day. And so what happened is you didn't have to have the big warehouses because the products were being stored by the provider or something like that. But the downside is what we're experiencing right now. It's on a ship someplace, so you don't have it. So that's the reason why you go to the store 3 times to find toilet paper. You're going to the store 3 times to be able to find anything right now. I'm just shocked at how all the shelves are empty for something, and then you go back and those shelves are full, but something else is empty. So anyway, but the point is that you're trying to remove the waste is what you're trying to do. Waiting time is one of the things that is identified. Waiting is considered a loss or non-value. So you want to make sure, can we speed this up and not have them waiting longer than they should. Removing any kind of waiting time increases speed and is looked at as increasing value because time is money. Low quality and defects, increasing the quality of the product or service by reducing errors and doing rework. All of that is looked at as waste that we can get rid of. Over processing or inspections. Creating numerous inspections and review might slow down the process and hurt productivity and bring little or no value. And this sounds almost like counterproductive, I'm sure, because you think, well, what's wrong with an inspection? Nothing. But some organizations have gone overkill on inspections. And so you're inspecting this thing to death. And so the process, which could take, let's say the process could take 30 days, it's taken 43 days because we've got 13 days of inspection. And if it's bringing value, it might even make sense. But the point is that those 13 days of inspection, would there not be a better way to have inspections in 2 or 3 places, but not have to have 13 days of inspection? And those are the type of questions you and your team would answer, is where can we have an inspection, obviously, but where it's bringing value, not just waiting time. And that's one of the pieces you're having to look at. One of the things too that we have to look at is standardization. Of course, in project management, we ask people to run projects following a similar process based on the project. Well, you get into that with best practices as well. And because you're looking at waste and you're looking at so many different things, you're looking at how can we take this process and improve it and standardize this process to where everybody's following it and is going as fast as it possibly can go. So you've got industry best practices. Organizations follow best practices that align with quality standards. But here's the thing to always remember about a best practice. If you want to align with a best practice, that's fine, but that best practice has to be followed at 100% to gain the benefits that best practice is saying that it can bring. And so when we talk about a best practice, you have to follow it at 100%. There's also known as a good practice, and many of you have read that in PMBOK. And a good practice means that generally that process brings about value, but you don't have to follow every step. So I've got a best practice over here that in order to get all the value, I have to do everything. I've got a good practice over here that in order to get value, I have to look and see what fits my industry or my organization. So you've got a good practice compared to a best practice. Now, new processes are created for new products, services, or outputs. And sometimes those new processes have not been streamlined yet. It's brand new. Nobody's ever done it before. You're trying to create the steps that we need to follow. We get it into play because you're trying to get the products out the door. And then over time, what happens is we just kind of allow it to cocoon itself into assuming that it must be efficient and effective, but it maybe isn't. We just got those steps in. We thought those steps were needed. It's getting the product out the door. But now we need to be going back and looking at that process. How can we streamline that process? So over time, even new processes will adjust to and sometimes get slow as compared to what we really need. And so we have to go back and look at this. We also might need to use standardized tools, and those tools can make a huge difference. Standardization uses tools to reduce time and minimize waste for repeatable success. So what would be an example? Templates, forms, training, glossary of terms, acronyms, checklists, process maps, flowcharts. You can look at airline pilots who do their checklist that's customized to that plane. And the reason they do that is so they don't forget anything, and so that it's just brain dead simple for them to go through it. They don't even think about it. They just click down through the checklist. So anytime we can take some of these tools and bring them over into project management. For an example, what would a checklist do for different aspects of the project? Man, it would change everything because it would remind us of what we need to do and verify that we haven't had something fall through the cracks. And so any of these kind of things that we could bring in would really help us be able to do this. Now, the other topic that comes up with processes is when people talk about process maturity. Process maturity defines a process which is high functioning, continually improved, and supported with automation when possible. It examines the functionality of a process through 5 different stages. So here's what you're looking at. The first is informal. That's kind of the ad hoc view that we all have. The second is that process has been documented so that it can be repeatable. And so now everybody sees what that process is. This is usually done in a best practice kind of setting. And so everybody who has best practices, they see the documentation of that particular process. Integrated, that process is now defined. It's starting to have more details to it. You're starting to see where this process influences others. And then manage, cross-functional, this process is starting to influence other processes. And so now we're starting to manage not only this process, but also everything to where it's connected to something else. And then optimized is really what you're trying to do. And that's where there's continuous improvement, meaning every so often those processes are looked at again just to make sure that they're still running in an efficient and effective manner. And so that's what you're looking at. Now, many of you who've worked in project management for a long time have seen the word and used the word Kaizen. Kaizen is really a Japanese term for continuous improvement. So Kaizen believes everyone is involved in continuous improvement. No one should be left out of the discussion. So the idea is that everybody sees different aspects of the process or well, I'll stick with that, the product or the process. And so through the eyes of those who are connected to this, they have the ability to be able to give feedback. So Japanese companies do not look at Kaizen as a program, but it's a way of life, meaning I definitely want your input because I know you're working with this product, or I want your input because you're working with this process. So Kaizen is ingrained in every aspect of learning, advancement, and life. Why? Because whatever stakeholders are connected to it, we want them to be able to see this and give input about this particular piece. Now, there's something known as the Kaizen umbrella. So it's customer orientation, total quality, suggestion systems, automation, discipline, new product development, Kanban boards. And of course, we know that Kanban or Kanban boards are boards that are on the wall, and it shows the process. Most of the time we use it to show where the project or different aspects of the project are in the process, what's been completed, what still needs to be done. Then quality improvement, zero defects, cooperative labor, and productivity improvements. And so all of these would be looked at under the Kaizen umbrella as being continuous improvement, aids and tools for continuous improvement. So the process improvement structure, we've got established processes in the organization, and now we're bringing in the new or the changed processes. So it could be a brand new process for a brand new product that we want to get out the door, okay? Or it could be that we've got a brand new process because of automation, or maybe it's not all automated, but maybe there's pieces of it that is automated. So now what we are able to do is we're able to change that process or parts of the process because of that automation. And then, of course, process improvement is bridging the gaps of both of these. We're taking the old processes and the new processes, and we're bridging them together to where we've got something that's going to be very effective. Process improvement needs to support, though, has to support best practices if those are best practices we're trying to comply to, but also innovation, because even though you've got best practices, those best practices are going to get out of date over time. And so what's happening is innovation. And of course, with technology, just recycling every 3 years, you're talking about technology doubling, or every 18 months it's considered to be doubling. Then there's going to be innovation someplace in this process. And so depending on the type of project you run, depending on the type of products that your organization gets out the door or services they get out the door, that innovation is going to grow extremely fast. And so we've got to be able to be on the cutting edge of that innovation, or we're going to get out, once again, we're going to be out of step once again. And so you might be actually in some of your products and some of your processes, you might be looking at continuous improvement every 12 months or 18 months on them just to stay updated. So as we look at these categories of process to view, so let's look at it from the straight down just to make sure that you understand what we're talking about. Every organization is going to have these strategic goals. And so every organization has these, and that's going to be what drives that company or that organization for the next year or the next 5 years, whatever it is. So if you follow it all the way through, that strategic goal is going to put money into portfolios because that's where they're going to get their return on investment. Who will put money into programs, which is going to drive that. Who will eventually put money down into projects, and that's where most of us live, is in that project level. Well, the thing is that if our processes are out of step, not only is it going to take longer to get it all the way down to us, even as we're trying to run those projects are going to be out of step at different places because of waste and waiting time. And that's the reason why, even though we're looking at it at the project level, there might need to be process improvement at the program level, and there might even need to be process improvement at the portfolio level. And follow me on this, there might even need to be process improvement at the strategic level. So all these levels could have their own process improvement going on in order to get rid of waste. So the organizational level is going to be at the strategic level. Monetary, remember, is portfolio. That's where they're putting their money. They're anticipating a return on investment from these projects and programs. And then we've got our program level and our project level. So why use process mapping? Maybe you've never done it before. Process mapping is for the sole purpose of identifying waiting time, bottlenecks, improved customer value, improved customer experience. Now, one of the things that to show you what I think is inefficiency. So let me share one, because you're getting ready to go into it right now. If we're going into Christmas time, people are going to buy gifts, and then right after Christmas, everybody's taking some of these gifts back because, wrong size, doesn't fit, we don't like it, whatever the case is. Okay. So this happened a few years ago. My kids bought me a shirt at one of the mall stores, and it's one of the stores at the mall for young men. Beautiful shirt, but didn't fit me. I'm a big guy, and this shirt's for little guys. So you go back and you ask for you've got the receipt and you got the shirt. So I asked for a bigger size first off. Well, that was a joke because, my body type is not part of, of what they sell. So I asked for money back, but they wanted to give me a gift card. Okay, so think about what from their process, they wanted to give me a gift card. What good was that gift card for that store if what they have doesn't fit me? And that was my pushback. And so the lady said, well, our policy is to give you a gift card. And I smiled and I said, well, my policy is cash, and you don't have anything here to fit me. I said, so my policy is cash. Give me a gift card means nothing, because now I've got a card I'm keeping up with that has items that don't fit me. And so finally it got to the manager, and the manager said, well, our policy is a gift card. And I smiled and I said, well, my policy is cash. And so she finally gave my cash back to me with that same reasoning. Now, the reason why I'm saying that to you is think about what, of course, from their angle. Let's go from their angle. Putting it on a gift card is better for that company because it keeps that money in that company. Give me cash, I can spend it anywhere I want, okay? But putting it on a gift card keeps it within that company, because that gift card is going to be processed by that company for another purchase. And so I can understand why they want that. And putting on a gift card is better for the company for this reason. 85% of those gift cards are never redeemed. I don't know if you know that, but if you do the research, you'll find out 85% of the gift cards, people lose them, drop them, forget about them, and never redeem them. So everything about this said put it on a gift card from the company, except for one thing. I'm standing there saying, I want cash. I don't want a gift card. And my point in saying all of that is that the process that they have was very much protecting them, but it was not really geared for the customer, or not my type of customer. I did not fit their customer mold there. Okay, so you map out the process. So you create a map of the current process. So a lot of times people want to start with what the new process needs to be. You're not there yet. You got to find out, get your old process mapped out. If it's not mapped out, many of you have that already, but you get it out, and then you start looking for the dead time, the bottlenecks, and where the problem areas are. So you include each step, any waiting time or downtime the current process is experiencing. So be truthful with it. Suggestion on this is work with a team, and one of the simplest things for you to be able to do, let me just show you, just use Post-it notes. Many of you use these for everything in the world anyway, but your Post-it notes will let you build that on a wall with your people, and it runs really fast. And many of you already know that. You already use that for something like that. And it allows you to put each step, and then when somebody remembers something, you're able to realign it. Analyze the process with an idea of reducing time, making the process bring more value. That's what you're looking for. How can we speed it up? Do we absolutely need this sign off right here? We've got a sign off here. We've got one right before it, 2 steps before it. What value does this sign off bring? Now, also, after the process is complete, dissect where the process you think it's not efficient, and let your team give inputs. And then what you do is create a new process, removing those inefficiencies. And then, of course, you're looking at it again. Is there any inefficiencies in the new process that we can remove? So as you're doing this, many of you will then turn around and put the process into something that's going to be visual. And so let's talk about that a moment. One of the most simple programs out, I think, is going to be Visio for you. And so flowchart symbols. And so we've got all these different symbols. So let me show you what they should be based on all the research tells us about flowcharts. Okay. So the box represents an activity and normally uses verbs or nouns for identification. Diamonds represent reviews, decisions, and inspections. So if we see a diamond, we know that there's some kind of, normally a decision is taking place. Arrows are going to show the direction the process is flowing and the connection from one one symbol to the next. The arrow shows the direction that it flows. And then if you see this, this triangle, it's a storage document. That's really what that's for. So the storage document represents storage or filings. And then as you see this, this looks like the big D to me, the big D symbol. And so the big D shows any type of delay, batching, waiting, or bottleneck. Now this right here is what you're looking for, because if you see the bottleneck there, now the sad thing is that most of the time in your processes, we have not magnified delay, waiting, or batching. Many times it's there, it's between two activities, but this is hidden. And so you and your team have to talk about it and realize that there's batching or there's delays of 3 days here, but you might not see that symbol on your flow chart. And then also the stop, the oval shows the beginning and the ending of a process. And then the circle represents a cross-reference to another process. And so you have to consider that, because that delay that you have here, that's waiting time, you have to make sure that that's not connecting to another process and is going to influence it in a negative way. And so you and your team are going to need to look at that. So anyway, this shows process connections for you. Then one of the things that you're going to need to do is discuss removal of the waiting time, any downtime. So what steps would help reduce or remove the waiting time? So this is a question you and your team would talk about. And by this, you're deciding how to get rid of that 3-hour waiting time. Do we really have to have that? Who else is impacted with the removal of the waiting time? So you're looking at other processes, you're looking at other people, you're looking at other groups. Your group might be okay with it, but if it's hurting someone else, you want to know that now. Does the waiting time support some type of quality best practice or plan? And so that's going to be a piece that you're going to have to track down. Maybe your process is fine without it, but this other process has to connect to it and has to have that waiting time because of the best practice they're trying to follow. And then you evaluate the process. So I wanted to show you the schematic that would maybe help you a little bit, just as a suggestion. You probably have something that you already use. So you look at the sequence, the duration, the type of symbol, that was the symbol of the graphic that we were showing you. What is this step included? Why is this step included? What is the reoccurring frustration about these steps? And then a description. So by going through this process and asking these questions like this, it kind of helps you be able to surface where there's some bumps. Now, some might not be that bad, and some you think, oh my gosh, I can't believe we've missed this. And that will be some of your discussions. And then you evaluate the waiting time itself. Does the waiting time make sense in bringing value to the customer? Does the waiting time make sense for the process? What happens if the waiting time is reduced or removed? Does it just speed up the process, or does it create a domino effect someplace else? Does removal of the waiting time reduce the quality of the product or service? A lot of times people will have waiting time there, and of course what's propagated is, well, it's a quality product or quality service. Well, not if nothing's happening. If that product and service is quality that's coming out, and we've got 8 hours of waiting time here and nobody's doing anything during that 8 hours, that's not affecting quality at all. So you get rid of the 8 hours, the quality has remained the same, and you've also reduced that process 8 hours. Now, the other thing that you might want to consider, and I'm just going to give you a handful of slides on this, is process auditing. And so what you're needing to do is take a look at the process. And so phases for changing culture. So one of the things that you'll do as you start auditing the process is culture changes. And so of course, once again, software changes the culture as well because it's automated, but you're trying to build momentum, you're trying to change the mindsets and then continuously improve. Some of the things we're doing right now manually, you won't do manually in the future. It's going to be automated. And if you look at some of the things that we're doing today, where some of the things are already automated that we used to have to do manually. So all of that, you're just trying to make sure that you're looking at it through new eyes for continuous improvement. So transitioning process improvement to a lifestyle. So you want to move this thing along to where it's not just something we did on a couple of processes because we had a project that was influencing it. You want to use it for that as well, but you want this to be a lifestyle. How can we improve? How can we continue to improve these processes and bring more value to the customer, a better product, a better service, be more cost effective, all of these pieces. So let's start with building momentum. It helps all parties identify with the need for changes in the process and keep everyone moving forward. So management and employee alike need to be able to anticipate that we need to be making these adjustments. Second part, change mindsets. Many do not like change. And maybe you're one of those. Mindsets can and will change if it makes sense to the culture. And so you're not wanting change for change's sake, because you're not wanting this to just be the new flavor of the month. That's a waste of time. But if this is bringing a product to the table faster, if it's bringing value to the customer faster, if it's taking less steps for your worker to have to do, all of that will make sense to the people. And then the last piece is continually improve core competencies, improve processes, improve metrics. Are we even measuring the right stuff? Maybe we are, maybe we're not. So creating a process improvement culture means looking at the culture of the organization. So culture is the internal personality of the organization. What is allowed, how people respond, act, or joke about a situation. So if our idea, if our culture and our idea of that culture is that we want to be continuously improved and to be on the cutting edge of quality and best practices and value, then we're going to look at culture totally different, because it's not just going to be the external customer. It's going to be how we look at each other internally as well. I want things to be good for you. I want you to be able to work with the most efficiency as possible. Also, creating a process improvement culture frees the employees to point out any type of gaps in the process for adjustments. So they don't feel like they're going to get their hands slapped if they bring up this process is kind of clumsy, or that this process is not working, because the culture supports that kind of mindset. And then a process improvement culture does not fight anyone for bringing up suggestions and ideas to change. They support it. Why? Because this is going to bring more value, which is going to make it easier for us, which is going to bring a better product and service to the customer, and it's going to make the company more money. So all of those are reasons for being able to support this. So the process improvement culture that you're looking at goes through several stages: identify, discuss, focus, and solve. Because once again, we're always looking at how we can take the organization, or take the process, or take the product, or take the service from where it is now to be able to make it better. And most organizations want to do that, even if they don't do it very well. So under identify, you're continually identify problems, identify before they grow into major issues. And so you're wanting your people to do this with you. You're also wanting to discuss problems openly, look at problems without judgment. So nobody is fearful to bring up something to talk about. Nobody is fearful to criticize a process, because once again, that's part of that new culture. And then focus on large and small problems. Small problems matter also. And sometimes we want to tackle the big ones. You get enough small problems happening. We've all been there. Those small problems turned into a major problem. And then solve real problems. Go to the root cause. Don't solve the surface level stuff. Go to the root cause. What's really causing this? And this might take you into the root cause analysis, or the 5 why analysis, which it's called as well. And that would help you in that area. So where do you begin? Look for a medium-sized process to improve. That's the best way to do it. Get your people in there, get them working on this. It'll feel clumsy in the beginning, as you already know. Many of you have already done this. But it's okay. Clumsiness is okay. You're wanting people to look through those analytical eyes to be able to look for waste in those areas. Select something which has waiting time or needless delays that maybe you already know about. Discuss with management the goal, desired outcomes in using process improvement in every aspect of what you're doing. Redesign the process and look for any hindrances with the new process. Is this new process not just different, because you don't want just different, you want it to be better. And so is it different, but also is it better? Is it bringing more value? Is it getting things to the outputs faster? And then move the new process into the mainstream for a trial time, and then make it permanent. And so that trial time means that it's okay for us to have to tweak it. It's okay for us to have to change it. It's okay for us to evaluate it. We're looking to see and verify that this is going to work. Now that brings us to the end of this webinar. I want to talk about a couple of things for you before you get out of here. Next month, our webinar is going to be leading and managing virtual teams, and that will be on December the 10th. And so you'll be able to be part of that if you'd like. We already have our webinars listed for all of 2022, so that we've got new topics out so that you can go ahead and sign on and be part of that. And of course, there'll be one PDU for each of those as well. The other piece is I want to talk about something that we've tested, and we've actually had a second group, and it's called our PMP Mastermind Groups. This is a free service that we started this year. And what it really is, it's 5 hours is what it is. We do it over the course of a week. It's a 5-day course. And so it's for people who are thinking about doing their PMP. And in that 5 days, they're looking at some videos. They're also filling out their application, and we're helping them kind of put together what it is they need to be able to get approved by PMI so that they can take the PMP test and kind of get all their ducks in a row. By attending this, it's the commitment of about an hour a day for 5 days. They get 5 free contact hours. The other thing is that I look at the applications. They can send their application to me. I do 2 Zoom calls to where people can ask any question they would like. In that course, we also expose them to PMP questions that we have purchased from PMI. So they take a small practice test. It's not real large, but a small practice test. They also start looking at some of the verbiage and definitions that PMI will use and possibly use on the test. And they go from, they get a $900 discount on their fee for attending the PMP, because it drops from $2,450 down to $1,550 for them to attend. And then one of the things that we've been doing too is that out of that group for that week, we will do one drawing and give someone a free scholarship to attend the PMP class. And so we've given 2 people. We've had 2 classes, given 2 people. I've got a granddaughter who's taking care of that part, so that she pulls it out. And this is the person who's won, and we notify the whole group that week. This is the person who won the free scholarship for the PMP class. So this is free, and anybody can be part of it. Even if they decide not to go with us for the PMP class, that's fine. This would still be something that maybe would help them. And if you took the PMP, you know, some of this is kind of clumsy anyway. You don't really know what or who you should be talking to and looking for. And so we kind of cover all of that through videos and Zoom calls and everything like that. So anyway, PMP Mastermind class, we've got 3 of those for next year, free of charge. Anybody can sign up for those. So if you know somebody who'd like to sign up, plus the discount, plus the potential of winning a free scholarship, get them to the website and let them sign up for that. Now, let me stop right here and answer any questions from anybody for just a moment. We've got just a few minutes here, and see if anybody has any questions. So let me open this up to where I can see some of the names and stuff. There we go. And so the chat's open too. Any questions from anybody who would like to ask anything about the process improvement and what we were talking about this morning? Anybody? All right, though, you'll be getting a link to the video after it processes. What is the most improvement you've seen? Well, it's kind of hard to tell, because I'm always the outsider on the of the company, and so it's hard for me to really tell how much improvement. They were excited about the improvement that they saw internally, but I don't really know that I knew how much it was. They were ecstatic over it. So, so the thing is that I think I'm kind of out of place for that. You almost need that internal person who really sees all the ins and outs of it. And I think I'm the outside person who's kind of helping coaching, but I don't know exactly how much it was, but they loved it. You appreciate today's session. Thanks so much, Dana. I appreciate that. You're using recommendations to get started. Good. Awesome. Any other questions? I think the cool thing about process improvement is you've got the people who are in the know working on that. And the main thing too is that they're the ones who know where the gaps are and where things aren't working. Even if it's never been talked about, they're the ones who know that. All right, well, thank you so much for being here. And so I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family and of course Christmas. I'll talk to you before Christmas on December 10th for the next webinar. So I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your families. Be safe traveling, okay? Bye everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. Take care. Bye folks.